Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden, and we're down to the final four Stanley Cup hopefuls, one from each of the NHL's revised divisions, which means for the first time all year, these teams will be facing an opponent outside of their own division. And that, of course, makes predictions a little more difficult, which is why we're here to break down the semifinal series between the Vegas Golden Knights and Montreal Canadiens. After knocking off the President's Trophy winning Colorado Avalanche, the Knights are in the Final Four for the third time in 4 seasons, and they'll face the lowest ranked playoff team in Montreal, who actually finished 18th in the overall standings this season. But as we've mentioned in previous episodes, this is a different Montreal team than the one we saw in the regular season. They are unquestionably the hottest and most well-rested team in the league right now. But the question is that going to be enough to upset the heavily favorited Knights? Let's look at some of the biggest factors in this series, starting with the one that always weighs heavily at this time of year, and that's health. Vegas is remarkably healthy, but Montreal is limping into this series despite that extra rest. Jake Evans will miss at least game 1 as he continues to recover from the concussion he suffered from being hit by Mark Scheifele at the end of game 1 there in round 2. John Merrill is also unlikely to suit up, but the biggest question mark in this series is defenseman Jeff Petry, who left game 3 and did not suit up for game 4 after he caught his right pinky finger in the camera hole of the glass. I don't think I've ever seen an injury quite like this one before. Canadiens head coach Dominic Ducharme said the Habs are not confident any of the trio will be ready for game 1, and there are rumors Petry could miss up to 3 games. Rookie Alexander Romanov made his playoff debut in game 4, but the trio Shea Weber, Joel Edmondson, and Ben Sherratt all logged between 25 and 27 minutes of ice time with Petry out there in game 4. Steele, do you think Montreal can withstand Petry's absence if he's out multiple games?
No, I don't think they can, especially if he's out longer than 2 games. He's just a huge part for this Canadiens team, especially on the defensive side, but we've seen what he's able to do on the offensive side, able to jump in some plays and, accept that drop pass and just rip it on net. So if he's out for 3 games or more, there's no question Montreal is losing this series against this physical and talented Vegas Golden Knights team. So it's gonna be even more difficult now without Petry in the lineup, especially for game 1. And Montreal's forwards, they're gonna have to be really focused and really determined playing defensive hockey in this series, especially with Petry being out. So guys like Philip Deneau, who we know is one of the best offensive defensive players out there, he's really going to have to step up his game in the defensive zone here. The whole entire team will have to with Petry out of the lineup.
Yeah, what a huge loss for Montreal. You got to feel terrible for Jeff Petry, too. Maybe the best season of his career and probably the best opportunity for him to win a Stanley Cup. And, we're not even sure if we're going to see him in this series, but hopefully he's able to get back. Shea Weber and some of those other guys on that blue line are going to have to carry an extremely heavy load. And the thing about Vegas is they're a really heavy team. They're heavy on the forecheck. They play the body. It can really wear you down that extra amount. So I think playing even a couple extra minutes a game could really slow down Montreal's defensemen. So it'll be interesting to see as the series wears on if those guys seem to run out of gas. But let's discuss a pair of blue liners for Vegas. First off, Alex Pietrangelo's playoffs have been a bit overshadowed, but he's really found his stride in the postseason and rewarded the Knights for giving him that big contract. After scoring 23 points in 41 regular season games, he's had 8 in his first 13 playoff games with Vegas, including 5 points in his last 4. Now, he also averaged just over 24 minutes of ice time in the regular season, but logged more than 25 against the Avs. And when Pietrangelo is taking a breather, Shea Theodore has usually been on the ice, adding 6 points in 13 games after a stellar 42-point regular season. Now, he plays fewer minutes than Pietrangelo, but his advanced metrics are off the charts. And if you watch the way he moves the puck and his ability to dictate the play in all 3 zones, you'll see why many people consider him to be one of the best defensemen in the league. Steele, just how big of an advantage do these 2 players provide Vegas in this series?
It's a massive advantage for the Vegas Golden Knights. We're talking about some of the best defensive players who are very keen and very focused on when to jump in on plays and when to hang back and play defensive hockey there. So these two guys have the ability and determination and really just the physical grit to just jump in on plays and help the guys on the offense. Like you said, Pietrangelo, 8 points, 1 goal, and especially a big goal in that game 6, jumping up from the blue line and helping Vegas get on the board once again. And then Shea Theodore, all 6 of his points have been assists. But like you said, they're just so great at generating and determining the offense and create just odd man chances, just joining the rushes. So those two guys have been huge. But look at the guys who are on the bottom 4 as well for the Vegas Golden Knights. Nick Holden has really stepped up his game. We saw a couple of big goals from Alec Martinez as well in that series against the Colorado Avalanche. So it's not just those two guys in Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore. It's all their defensemen right now. Even Zach Whitecloud's been relatively better in the postseason than he was in the regular season. So those defense for the Vegas Golden Knights have really stepped up their game. And like we've talked about, with Petry being out of the lineup and Montreal going to have to focus a little bit more defensively, I think we're going to see the Vegas defense really jump into plays and try to get their game going offensively as well.
Everybody's talking about how amazing this Vegas team is. And frankly, the results have spoken for themselves in their first few, years in the league, and then knocking off the Colorado Avalanche, which I don't think anyone thought they would make it look as easy as they did, reeling off those wins to end the series. But let's talk about the advantage Montreal might have coming into this series. As great as Jack Campbell was for Toronto in round 1, Price has tilted the odds in his team's favor in each of the first 2 rounds. But this might be the first time he stares down an equal in the other crease. Marc-Andre Fleury's Vezina caliber season has continued in the playoffs as the ageless wonder boasts a .923 save percentage against the Avs in the Wild, the highest and 9th highest scoring offenses in the regular season. For comparison, Toronto and Winnipeg were ranked 6th and 12th in regular season scoring. So Price has faced some great scorers in his own right. For Montreal to win this series, I think Price will have to significantly outperform Marc-Andre Fleury, which is a really tall task. Do you think he's up to it?
Yeah, I don't think the Montreal Canadiens have the advantage in net here, but you said the word perfectly there. It's really equal. I think Fleury and Price are right there with each other, but I think he is up for the task. We've seen that in those first 2 rounds. He's a bona fide superstar against the Toronto Maple Leafs and again in that second round against the Winnipeg Jets. So he's up for this challenge. He's not going to let anything phase him moving forward in this series against the Vegas Golden Knights. He's up for the task, and he's ready to go because he's so close to being in the Stanley Cup Finals.
3 questions in, and we haven't even touched the offense in this series. So I want to discuss 2 of the best defensive forwards in the league facing off in this series. You mentioned one earlier, Phillip Danault and Mark Stone. What makes this matchup particularly interesting to me is I think both coaches likely want these lines to face off against one another. So the usual home ice advantage of line matching might not have much effect on this specific series for each team's top lines, unless, of course, Vegas decides Montreal's second line poses a bigger offensive threat, which we'll get to in a minute. Comparing each team's top 6 here, Vegas's top line can not only shut down their opponent, but they can produce at an extremely high level as well, with Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, and Chandler Stevenson, and they'll likely, as I said, be facing off against Phillip Danault, Brendan Gallagher, and Arturi Lehkonen. The second lines pose an extremely interesting matchup as well. One of my favorite lines in the entire playoffs so far is Nick Suzuki centering Tyler Toffoli and Cole Caulfield. While Vegas boasts maybe one of the most underrated and productive second lines in the entire game, with Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith flanking William Karlsson. So, Steele, do you see either team having a significant advantage when their first and second lines face off?
I think without question, the Vegas Golden Knights have the advantage from their top 2 lines. If we're looking at a skill set and determination from those guys, it's obviously the Vegas Golden Knights. You have guys like Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, who are at the top of their boards leading the Vegas Golden Knights in points. They're top 4 right now for their club. And then you look at the top 2 lines for the Montreal Canadiens, and Nick Suzuki and Tyler Toffoli are up there. But then you have the all 3 guys from their fourth line coming up in third, fourth, and fifth. Corey Perry, Joel Armia, and
Eric Staal.
Eric Staal, thank you so much. Yeah, those three guys are third, fourth, and fifth Montreal Canadiens. So you're not really getting any offense and generating any opportunities from guys like Philip Deneau and Brendan Gallagher, even though they're still playing well. Deneau only has 2 points so far in the postseason. Gallagher only 4 points. So I believe the advantage goes to Vegas, no question. But when you're talking about producing from everyone, from the entire core you have up front, that's where Montreal gets a little bit of the advantage. Like I just mentioned, all three of those guys on the bottom line for the Canadiens, they're producing well, especially Corey Perry on the power play. And then right now you have a guy like Josh Anderson who has 1 point. He has 1 goal so far in 11 games in the postseason. So that's someone I'm really looking forward to step up, and I think really needs a big series in order for Montreal to win. But Vegas has the advantage in those top 2 lines. They're just too good. They're too dominant on the power play. They can generate some offense on the PK as well because, like I said, those defense are not afraid to jump up in the play. The advantage goes to Vegas, no question about it.
I actually love both these top sixes, and I do think you're right. I think Vegas has that big advantage on their first lines. I actually might give a slight advantage to Montreal, possibly with that second line. Now, I know Vegas' second line has been incredible, but I do feel like they maybe run a little bit hot and cold, and that line in Montreal has just been so dynamic. I think they're the best line on the team, frankly, and I'm glad you mentioned the bottom 6 too, because you need all 4 lines to win the Stanley Cup. You need all of them to be producing, and those veterans that a lot of people ridiculed Montreal for signing Corey Perry and then trading for Eric Staal and saying, it really didn't look like it worked out in the regular season. They're paying dividends right now in the playoffs. Now, Price and the Canadiens, they made my Jets in 6 prediction look awfully stupid, and they've proven me wrong now in 2 straight rounds. But before we get to my pick, I want to know how you see this series playing out.
Yeah, and I had Montreal in 6 last round, so I was off in a couple of games, but I still had them winning the series. But this one, I can't give it to them. I've got Vegas in 5, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And we talked about the rest that the Montreal Canadiens are getting right now. What about the rest that the Colorado Avalanche had? The rest that the Winnipeg Jets had? The Winnipeg Jets swept the Edmonton Oilers. They got a week's rest. They got swept by the Montreal Canadiens. Colorado, they swept the St. Louis Blues. They could have lost in 5 games. If the Vegas Golden Knights did not play Robin Lehner in Game 1, which was probably the worst coaching decision I've ever seen made, they could have won in 5 games against the President's Trophy team. So, I'm not a fan of this rest that we've been seeing. I said that that's why Montreal probably was going to beat the Winnipeg Jets. I just wasn't too sure if they would lose momentum from that sweep, and then they ended up getting swept by the Canadiens. So I've got Vegas in 5, and as much as I think Price is one hell of a goalie and a top 5 goalie after this postseason, Vegas is just too good, and Fleury is just too good right now. We're seeing the defensive really generate offense, like I've mentioned before. We're getting some scoring from that second line, like we just talked about, and Jonathan Marchessault getting a hat trick just the other day. William Karlsson leading with 11 points. I just think they're firing on all cylinders right now, and they're just too good.
This was pretty tough for me because, like I mentioned, I have underrated Montreal, and I didn't want to make that same mistake again. And I was going to go Vegas in 7, but just looking at what we know and what we've seen in these playoffs and the way that Vegas handled that series against Colorado, there was absolutely no panic when they went down. Frankly, they should have won the second game, and then being down 2 games, they just took it to Colorado. And, I just feel like no matter if they get the lead here, I think they're going to want to put away Montreal as soon as possible after seeing the way they came back against Toronto. And even if Montreal jumps out to the lead, I don't think there's going to be any panic in that Vegas dressing room. So I'm going to go with the Golden Knights in 6. That's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steel Road, and I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.